Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. Welcome. My name is Karuna Avatar. With me is my dear co-host Jai Jagannath, and then as well, a most welcome to our esteemed guest, His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. Prabhu, we're very, very happy to have you here. And just for those that may not know, Mahatma Prabhu is also my spiritual master. So I will be referring to him as Gurudev throughout the show, just so that everyone is aware. I just quickly want to...
doesn't know me? I can't believe that. I feel so disappointed now. No, only kidding. Okay, go ahead.
So just a few introductory words for some people that may not know you, Gurudev. So Mahatma Prabhu is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. And when he was a young man, this meeting with Srila Prabhupada really inspired him to serve in ISKCON ashrams all around the world for several years. He had many diverse services, such as selling books, training new monks, managing the temple, developing educational programs, and overseeing outreach projects. His experiences over many decades in devotional service have culminated in the work he does today, developing seminars, workshops, online courses, and books through his company Sattva, which you can find at thesattva.com. He practically shows how spirituality offers solutions to today's challenges and how to see life as a spiritual practice. He's also very well known for his recorded and live music, his workshops on japa meditation, forgiveness, humility, living with vows, as well as relationships. So he is certainly a very, very experienced person who has helped people in all spheres of life. And we are immensely grateful that he has joined us. Gurudev, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, I'm like bubbling over with gratitude right now.
I also feel a little bit effervescent right now and humbled by your presence, as I was mentioning just before we came on. I've been hearing your name for the last 5 years from literally almost all of my guy friends, particularly because of the work you do of bridging what I would consider like a gap between our humanity and our devotion. And I would like to definitely get back to this a little bit later. But anyway, just thank you so much for being here. And we want to kick it off. We're calling this topic today sexual sobriety. Now, the meaning of the words are easily understood, just face value, but it has a very specific intention here. So we want to just start with that. What do we mean by sexual sobriety? Number one, why is it more important probably than ever? And how did you specifically get involved with this sort of topic as in sort of offering in our devotional communities?
Let me start with the third question.
Okay.
It happened with one thing a friend of mine told me that kind of was an earthquake for me, which I probably should have understood, but maybe I understood it and it was just what I needed. So he was going to an acupuncturist, and acupuncturist was a Buddhist. And they ask you lifestyle questions like, what do you eat? You exercise, your sexual patterns, and so forth. So he told him that what he said, well, I'm celibate. And immediately his Buddhist doctor said, who is your mentor? And he said, I don't have one. And the Buddhist doctor was like, no, you don't have a mentor. It was like, he was incredulous. Like, stop, just be serious. Who's your mentor? I don't have him. So that hit me like an arrow in the heart, So, and I'll explain why it hit me, because I think for two reasons. When I became a devotee, our daily schedule, I would say, was approximately 7 hours on the street. That was normal. And up to 9 to 12 hours on certain days.
Mm.
And, you know, you're all living in one room with all the brahmacharis. So controlling your senses in that environment, you didn't have time not to control them. There was like no time in the day to be uncontrolled, and there was no place to be uncontrolled. And there was no environment to be uncontrolled. You know, you're chanting all day, so what are you going to do? You know, you have to think of Krishna. You don't have a choice. So in that environment, practicing sexual control, it wasn't, or any kind of control, wasn't like you were really trying. It was just like there wasn't room for not doing it. But as the movement expanded and people were getting married, and many people, single people, this was practically never happened during Prabhupada's time. Single people were becoming devotees living outside. Like if you were single in Prabhupada's time, you didn't move in the temple, we'd like get a hammer and knock your head out. You know, it's like, what is wrong with you? You know, you believe in this philosophy, why don't you move in? It's like that's just what you did. So we weren't dealing with this. We weren't aware of the problem because, like I say, there was no time to deviate, had no consciousness to. So then there was this switch, and all of a sudden there were all these problems that we didn't have that people were having because they were outside. When I was joining, my father said, well, why don't you just live outside and continue going to university? And I said, no way, I can't. I could never make it outside. That was the prevailing mood. So, you know, and then, you know, I was married, and I would say maintaining that high standard of celibacy was probably amongst all the things I've done everything, you know, Sankirtan, temple president at age of 20, piece of cake, celibacy, we did it. And that was challenge. Controlling false ego, you know, being humble, I could manage. Celibacy, everything, you know. So having gone through that, you know, I kind of felt like, wait a minute, we're asking all these poor young men to be celibate after they've been, you know, like watching pornography since they're like, you know, 3 years old and so forth. This doesn't seem fair, you know. It doesn't seem fair to them, you know. So I think what happened was when that doctor told him that, it was just like, that was like everything in me that was saying, this is wrong. You're just asking a guy to be celibate. Fine. Send him out on Sankirtan for 8 hours a day with 20 other devotees chanting. He's going to be safe, right? We started sending them out alone to parking lots, 20-year-old guys, and parking lots during the week. The guys aren't shopping. It's all women. That was a whole new playing field. And they're coming back like, Prabhu, my mind is agitated. I can't imagine why. Well, you know, I talk to the women for 8 hours, you know, looking down on the car in the summer, you know, and they're not dressed. You know, it's like, so then I felt like you can't, it's not fair to ask them without, if they live in a temple, okay. But even now we're finding, because like you were intimating, now we're finding even in the temple, because every brahmachari has one of these, you know, these dangerous devices that might destroy you. Everyone has one, and it's infecting the brahmachari ashram now. So we didn't have that as brahmacharis. So now that support extended beyond what I needed right into the ashram. And I had the experience I was in Delhi in one temple, maybe like 5 years ago, and they're like, can you talk to us, the brahmacharis? I'm like, sure. You know, I don't know what they're going to talk about. This was the topic. We met 2 days, talk about 2 hours each day. And they all said, we never talked about it. So then there's one more experience I had that really impacted me almost as much, maybe as much as what the doctor said. After all, you know, after the devotee said that, I said, okay, I'll do a sexual purity seminar, right? And then we advertised it in Alachua, and all these women are coming up to me and go, you're really brave. And I go, why? He said, no man is going to go to that, because if they go, then that's like a signal to the community they're having trouble. I didn't even think of that. Anyway, we got like 7 out of a community of maybe 500 men. We got 7. But this is what they said, and this is really significant, and I'm sure you're totally aware of this. This is what they said. Well, we're all it's, open, safe environment. So say what you're going to say. It's not going out of the rooms. Everybody started talking about their struggles. And it was kind of like the mood was like, once they got it out, was like, and you know what their comment was? I've been struggling with this alone my whole devotional career, maybe my whole life. This is the first time. This is the first time. And so we created buddies, and then they said, I don't have to do this alone anymore. That was a big takeaway from, I said a million things, but that was the main thing. I don't have to do this alone. So that was the whole history of this. Support, like we have to have support. So we created a site called Devotee Support, and on that site, sexual purity is one aspect of it. And the whole point is we have groups where people can open up and talk, because as we know, if you hold it inside, it stays inside and you can't heal. You have to bring it in the sun, right, to heal it. So I saw that personally in this sexual sobriety workshop. It was the biggest relief for them. And then, I'm going to tell you a funny story. I'll get to your other questions, but this is one story that's so funny. We were doing a workshop, wasn't my workshop, and where people were opening up about their problems. And there was one second generation, and his father was an alcoholic. The father was a devotee, but he would go in and out of alcohol. And a lot of his life, he grew up in a van on the road, in hotels. It was like, really, really difficult life. And he had many, many problems from that. And I've known him since he was a kid. And he was probably in his early 20s when he came to that workshop. So everybody was revealing their problems. And then it came to him, and he was laughing. And he said, I thought I was messed up. You guys are more messed up than I am. And he was like, hey, that was the biggest relief for him. He's like, it feels really good to know how messed up you guys are. You're worse than I am. And so that was my entranceway into something that I saw many times happening, is everybody thinks there's something uniquely wrong with me, because the other devotees could not be struggling like I am, because I see them at the temple and they're all austere and, dancing in the kirtan, and they know so many shlokas. They definitely couldn't be having the problems I had. When you get in that situation and you open up, everyone realizes, oh, you have the same problem I do. And it's such a relief. You don't think there's something wrong with you. So all of that was kind of behind my work in this, because I don't want to, I came to the point and said, I don't think it's fair to ask someone to be celibate if you can't support them, or really ask them to do anything, get married, no support. How did that work out for ISKCON, Not too good, how does the celibacy thing without support work out? This one teacher, people tell him, I do this, I don't agree with you. And he says, well, how's that working for you? The big answer, how's that working for ISKCON? No support marriages, no support for this. How's it working? Not too good. So now, I don't know if you realize this other question, how do we define sexual sobriety? It's a bit of a loaded question, because it's also like, what can you actually do? I could define it in a way you couldn't even ever imagine doing it until you're like 76. Your body doesn't work anymore, So yeah, then I can do it. I always tell devotees that, growing old is cool, because at a certain point, just the energy levels go down. So,
Wow.
Nature has a system. So that's the second problem. Like, 100, 150 years ago, yeah, celibacy is like, yeah, that's what you do. It's a funny story. This devotee is from Guyana, right? Guyana, it's all Hindus, and it's very simple, right? So he didn't know about the Hare Krishna movement. And when he finally found what the four regular principles are, he said, Well, like, what's the big deal? Everyone in our village follows those 4. That was like normal, you know?
Wow.
So, you know, if you go back far enough, you know, whether they follow it internally or it's just externally, that's, you know, that's the culture. So now we're asking, you know, the boys realistically who are, you know, introduced to sex at 11, 12, or 13, you know, we're asking them to become celibate, sexually pure, you know. So, you know, how do you want to define that? How, you know, of course, Prabhupada defined it for us. But the question is, are you ready to take that vow? And, you know, and if not, what is the vow? And even if you take the vow and you get married, okay, then how do you do it in marriage? You know, how far can you go so you don't, you know, the problem is, and I've run into some discussions where this wasn't appreciated, but it's a reality. You know, if you set a goal too high and you can't make it, then what do? You beat yourself up, right? Absolutely. You just lower the goal, you do the same thing, but you lower the goal. Oh, I'm successful, you know, but as soon as it's here, I'm a failure, but here I'm a success. So sometimes that has to be adjusted in terms of how you define sexual sobriety. You know? And we know how Prabhupada defined it, you know, just sexually, just celibate, get married for children. That's it. Realistically, you know, I wish it were that easy. Right.
How would you define it? Yeah, like what I'm hearing from you is that it might exist on a spectrum, depending on who you know, with whom you're dealing and where they're at in their own, you know, spiritual trajectory. So what are the ways that you've defined it for those who have sought shelter or guidance from you? Like reasonable ways given the circumstances of today. And what is it? If you had to give it a spectrum, not like a fully detailed spectrum, but some like general categories of sexual sobriety. What might you say to that then?
Yeah. Well, I can start with a general principle. And I was giving a course. Oh yeah, I was giving a course on vows. And I was feeling like this is a very important course. But I was feeling a little afraid that it might be too heavy and discourage people. And I spoke to Archer in the city about it, and she agreed that in the name of getting people to stretch, you could end up discouraging them. They're going, "Oh, you're fanatic, and that's impossible." So I asked her, "Well, how do you deal with that?" Okay, here's the standard, right? 16 rounds. Let's say we'll just use 16 rounds, 4 principles. That's a standard. And I think your question has 2 aspects. One aspect, what's your standard if you haven't made the vows? And what's your standard after you make them, which is obviously more sensitive once you make them, which is a bigger problem because before you make them, you don't have to beat yourself up so much because you didn't make them. You don't have anything to beat yourself up about other than the fact that maybe you want to make them. So I said, well, how do you deal with people who have made vows they can't follow? She said, the first thing is what Prabhupada says in the book. Don't be adverse to the goal. You can't be adverse. Like, this is the principle. And they'll go, well, Prabhupada said that was 1969. Now it's 2020. And, you know, it's not real. And, you know, it's got GBC and gurus, you know, that whole thing. No. That's the goal we want. But all that other talk is like, where am I at right now? And what can I do? As if I can't do it, what can I do as a stepping stone so it won't destroy me on the way so I can get there? Because it's got to be a stepping stone that's solid. So I like that. So she said, okay, if let's say someone's chanting 16 rounds and they stopped or they can't, so she would say, well, can you do 4 or can you do 8? And I can do 8 and say, good, to do 8. And then go from there to avoid the negativity. So I think you have to apply that to everything. As a leader and as a guru, I can't really come out and say it's okay to chant 8 and this and that. But as someone who studied psychology and counsels devotees, I can say a lot of times it's better than to chant 0 rounds and beat yourself up for not chanting 16, which is where it ends up often. You gotta chant 16. I'm so bad. And what's the result? I don't chant. I chant 0. So if I say, chant 8, So I had another conversation, very interesting conversation with a devotee counselor when I was developing these course, and I asked her kind of a similar question. What do you tell people who come to you and say, I've stopped chanting? You know what she says? Or you can say, I've stopped following the principles. You know what she says? She says, I tell them you don't have to. And I'm like, what? She said, yeah, because they feel forced. And once you tell them you don't have to, they connect with their desire to do it. And she said, and they actually start doing it because they lost the original intent because they felt forced. Which is very, very interesting. So, you know, you have to follow this, you have to do that. Then you lose your sense of identity of the person wanting to do it because you feel pressure. You take, she said, I take that out and say, look at, nobody's forcing you to chant. Nobody's forcing you to follow any of these principles. You do it if you want. So now there's nobody to blame because they were blaming like every temple president they'd ever seen.
Right.
That's why I'm not doing it, because those guys, you know, isn't it?
Right.
So I think, you know, before we say how I would teach people, I think that's the foundation, right? So you want to create a foundation by which they can grow. So you can say in 10 years or 20 years, they're going to be following. Because I think the problem, I don't think I know, the problem I see in ISKCON is the shooting star syndrome. We're all, you know, like we're preaching for shooting stars. And another thing you see is the people who come slow, I'm not saying we should, but a lot of times the people who come slow, live outside, 20 years from now, they're doing better than the shooting stars. And I want to tell a funny story. I used to live in LA. I lived in LA. I grew up there. In different time periods, I lived in the temple. And every Sandhya Artik, there was this man come. He was an older man. I was probably 25. He was probably close to 50. And he was bald, shaved head. And he used to have a toothpick. And he put a chair in the back, Sandhya Artik, and he'd sit there, right, with a toothpick. And he'd just sit there. I never talked to him. Couldn't figure him out. You know, I thought he was from another planet. I was like kind of scared of, right? And then, so I would leave LA, you know, and you ever leave a temple, you come, well, this is what happens. If you move away from a temple, you come back 5-6 years, it's like 80% new faces. Where's so-and-so? Where's so? I don't know. We haven't seen them, you know, and all these new faces, right? So I come back to LA, all these new faces. Sandhya Artik, guess who's there? The toothpick man, you know, come back 10 years later, all new faces. Guess who's there? The toothpick man. So it was like everyone's coming and going. He never got that involved, but he, on his level, you know, he stayed steady. So that's a, you know, it's an image imprinted in my brain. So I think we can't have a discussion about sexual sobriety without establishing that first. And I feel that some devotees, they're just resistant to confront this reality. It's like they don't want to believe, because that wasn't my problem. You know, I was celibate. I did it, you know, and I maybe had a problem here or there. I overcame it. So if I did it, why not you? You know, it's like, yeah, but your spiritual master was Srila Prabhupada. And yeah, there were 350 devotees in LA, about 100, you know, of them brahmacharis, and you were living a room with 60 of them wall to wall. So, you know, no question you wouldn't get up for Mangal Artik in there. So in the sexual sobriety workshop that we did, we found it was best to let people describe. We called it sexual purity. Describe to them, what is your definition at this point? Like, what is your goal for sexual purity? And it should be a goal that you can step on to get to the next level. I want to say one more thing, which is super important and kind of, I think it's really important to consider this. And I think you asked the question, like, what was the consequence of sexual purity? Was that?
Yeah. Why is it more important than ever, perhaps during these times, to really start to get serious about that?
I'll answer that next, but I want to just explain why in general it's important. Because one of our goals is to chant Shuddhanam, pure chanting, and you can't chant Shuddhanam if you don't have things under control. You know, all, not just below the belt, everywhere. You know, here, and here. You have to have it under control everywhere, but especially there. That's our philosophy. That has to be under control if you're going to get to Shuddhanam, which is the goal. And then the other the other curse of not being controlled, temporary curse, is you hit a wall in terms of how much you can understand Radha, especially Radha Krishna Lila, because Radha Krishna Lila is free from that. And until you're free from that, you're like trying to look at it, but Radha looks like a woman and Krishna looks like a guy. And we're so saturated with sexual vibes. It's like, and this thing has nothing to do with it. It has zero to do with it. So how can you understand something that has zero to do with it until you have zero to do with it? So you deprive yourself of going into the depth of that, which is the goal of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is what Mahaprabhu gave. So I think it's important to at least acknowledge that this is the payoff. You say, okay, maybe I can't control myself. I understand that to the degree I'd like to. But as long as you know that thing which you want, that prize of entering in deeply into that, you know, as Krishna says, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Oveti Tattva, the understanding the tattva and the rasa of that, you deprive yourself to the degree that you're not controlled, because it has nothing to do with it, you know. And so it's like we're trying to figure out, wait a minute, a man, a woman, that has nothing to do with that. What compartment in my brain does that fit? Well, when you become a devotee, there is no compartment for it, right? And that you get a new compartment through celibacy, it opens up. But without it, there's no compartment for it. So it's like you miss out. So I think that's important to understand. Otherwise, we'll rationalize, I'm just a human, I'm just a young guy. Yeah, fine. But if you just want to be human and just a young guy, how are you going to understand Radha and Krishna? So I think that's important to consider. We're balancing everything, you know, like, okay, you have step by step, but when you get to that step, you get the prize. And as far as the problem today, I would expand it and I would say everything's a bigger problem today than it was when I grew up. Like, not just sexual thing, like everything.
Absolutely.
You know, depression, self-esteem, just psychological problems, bad families. I mean, you know, it's like, it's so different than it was 50, 60 years ago when I grew up. I mean, if you want to have fun, watch television shows from the 50s. You'll understand life. Just watch them and you're like, life was really like that in America. It's just so innocent. The father's there and the mother's there. And everybody's nice. And they eat breakfast together. You know, what to speak of one meal a week together. They eat breakfast together, you know. You know, I grew up 18 years in one house. I don't think there was ever a night we didn't eat together.
Wow.
I can't remember one night. Only one I didn't want to eat. And my mother's like, you have to eat, you'll die. But other than that, I would say 365 days a year for my whole 18 years, we at least dinner. You know, my father was at work, breakfast he may have had early, but oftentimes on the weekends we'd have breakfast. It was a different world. No divorce. It wasn't heard of. It wasn't in anybody's. So I had a lot of friends who were, you know, too sexual for their age, and that was bad association. So it was still going on then. But I think we had more stability to deal with it. And it was, you know, obviously we didn't have it on our phone. So, you know, like, you know, you're not going to be like a 13-year-old kid trying to hide your Playboy magazine. You know, what if you get caught? But you don't have to hide it on your phone, right?
Right.
Your wife grabs your phone and finds it there. You know, you're stupid enough not to erase it, and then she puts it on Facebook. Then you're finished. That's generally not going to happen. Well, it depends who you're married to. But so just logistically speaking, you know, it was a problem, but logistically speaking, social media, especially smartphones, and even if you don't have a smartphone, you just go, when your father's taking his nap, you get his smartphone. You know, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, yeah. So that has created an epidemic of pornography addiction that just wouldn't be possible any other way. And if it's not addiction, it's still there. It means in your weakest moments, your drug of choice is about 3 clicks away, right? So one man who teaches about addiction, he said, this is the easiest drug to get. There's no drug as, you know, you want to get cocaine, you know, you got to find someone who sells it and it's illegal. And Now, even you want to get marijuana, at least you got to drive to the marijuana store and get a bogus prescription or something. Or, just cover your face so your friends don't see what an idiot you are. But this, this is like, it's just the easiest drug out there. You just click and you've got it. And it has all the same symptoms, effects on the brain neurologically, and the symptoms of addiction. So that's what we're dealing with, which is all the reason more you need support, right? Because addicted people need support. And a lot of devotees are addicted and they don't know it. So I want to give a definition. I know you have more questions. I want to just give a beautiful definition of addiction that I got from a man named Gabor Mate, who is amazing, and he deals with addictions. He's got incredible insight, and he's also got a spiritual side. And he gave a simple a definition of addiction. You're doing something that's bad for you, and you can't stop doing it. I go, wow, that was about as succinct as it gets. So, the devotee says, well, how do I know if I'm addicted to something? Do you want to stop? Is it bad for you? And you can't stop? You're addicted. Pretty simple, right? I mean, you might have been kidding yourself up to now, but with that definition, I think it's okay. I'll stop talking and drink my tea.
I know Karuna Avatar has quite a few questions also, and I'm sorry to jump in just because of what you just brought up. I think it's a fitting place to bring this up now. If it's okay, Karuna Avatar, I just want to.
Prabhu, this is your show as well.
No, I know. I just want to. I know you have a lot, but it's just fitting here. I often think of sexual sobriety in any form that it's going to take for you as an individual, as you've explained it, as technological sobriety. Because for the modern man and woman, as you say, the indulgence in this particular problem is a technological indulgence primarily. Even if you had to be like a proper debauchee, you still have to level up on some, you got to build your body up, keep your mouth clean and look attractive, and then go out and get the thing. But now with technology, where, they have these 3 A's, it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's anonymous. So you don't have to do anything for yourself to get it. And so I often think of sexual sobriety as technological sobriety. And this is where the problem feels very much overwhelming, because we're so plugged in. I really feel like Neo from the Matrix, that all the wires are in and it's just like, I can't unplug. Yes. And we're so plugged in technology that to even offer the suggestion that sexual sobriety may be possible on whatever level you're trying to apply it, it can feel extremely overwhelming for us younger generations, guys who've been plugged into technology since the beginning. So what's your wisdom on this particular?
I have a solution. It's really easy. We do a fire yagya. Everyone brings their phone and offers it.
Jai,
and we all throw our phones in, and that's it. You are so correct in what you say. And one of the things I teach, and I think this is obvious, I teach about anything, but especially about sexual stimulation. Everybody knows what their triggers are, and everybody knows when they hit too many buttons. Like this trigger, okay, my heart's pounding, and that trigger, I'm sweating. But when I hit the third one, it's history, right? I'm finished. Right? So if you want to overcome a problem, whether it's addiction or a problem, you have to know your triggers. Well, if I get too close, if I spend too much time with this person or in this situation, whatever. I like music. I like my keyboard. I like my guitar. Once I go over half an hour, it's like, then it turns into 3 hours. I know that. That's history, So when you were speaking, I was hearing in my mind, phone is a trigger. And so it's a trigger because that's where your drug comes from. So how can you navigate it without pressing the button for the drug? And I think the answer for some is I can't. They have to admit that I can't. It's like I have to limit. Okay, 20 minutes in the morning, my phone only for my messages, my email. Then it goes off, and 20 minutes, something like that. I want to tell you, everyone who's listening, there's a site called Covenant Eyes, and they make a software. You have to pay a little something, 15 a month or something. And what this does is you choose a buddy, and that buddy will see every site you go to. So you can't go to a site without him seeing. And so when you're about on your third trigger and about to hit that click on that, you know he's going to see it and he's going to get on your case and you're going to be embarrassed. And you already vowed to him not to do it. So there are things you have to do to insulate yourself. And I think sometimes it's like my daughter said, like she said, I'm going to do this in the future, or I'm going to do this later, and I never do. Or I can withstand my temptation from this. If I just go out, it's okay. I won't be tempted. And she said, I've realized I cannot trust my future self. It is totally unreliable. And I think we all have to confront that future self that promises I won't. It's like, it's like when you're dealing on this level of a problem, you can't pretend that it's not a problem. And I think that's part of it. You can't pretend this is not a problem if this is where you get your drug. It's a huge problem, obviously. So in reply to your question, I think people who have trouble, whether it's an addiction or whatever it is just wasting time on their phone or whatever it may be, they need to just sit down and admit it. It's like, I have this problem. And the ego, of course, doesn't want to admit it because I thought I was a pure devotee and I thought everyone thought I was a pure devotee. If I admit I'm addicted to my phone, does that mean I'm not a pure devotee? If it does, I'm not going to admit it. It's like that, isn't it? We're like so afraid to admit I'm like something I'm not. And that's why we have the problem. So I think everyone has to admit their problem if they want to solve it. And if they don't admit it, they can't solve it. So, and also an answer to that question, what is sexual sobriety? Another answer is you're getting better. Like from wherever you start out, you're getting better. That's maybe you're not sober, but you're on a path of getting better. If you're getting better, then I say kudos to you. I don't care where you're at in a sense, because you're getting better and you're going to end up better next year, whatever, you'll arrive. So I think that's super important. And then you ask yourself, at the rate I'm going right now, what am I doing? Where will I be 10 years from now? That's a sobering question. And it's a very scary question, but you have to ask that question, right? If you can say, I'm going to be in a good place, then I say, good, you're doing the right thing. Do it, do more of it. And I'm not going to be in a good place, maybe a worse place. I asked that with japa. You chant japa like this every day the rest of your life. How's that going to work for you? And some people just are like, oh, I never thought of that. Yeah, well, we have to think of that. If I'm doing what I'm doing, is it actually worth doing or is it making it worse? So I think those are important questions, like confront it, like everyone out there, whatever your problem is, whether it's sexual or not, whatever it is, just admit you have a problem and then, do what you have to do. And if this is, like you say, if this is the problem and you have a pornographic problem, then just admit it and, get covenant eyes or whatever you have to do, or lock your phone in a safe, lock your phone in the attic after, look at it for 20 minutes, lock it in the attic above this, behind that, make it impossible to get to. And tell your, and get a plug-in phone like we used to and a voicemail and tell your friend, if you have any messages. Do you realize that I grew up most of my life without a mobile phone? Could you imagine how was that? That was so good. You were just unbothered by anything. And I'm waiting for the day that something happens in the atmosphere that fries the internet and we don't have phones and internet. I would be like, finally, life is going to be normal again. So, you will live. I guarantee you will live. If you hide your phone away, you will live. I mean, you need it for work, but other than that. So there's another thing you may know. Maybe you do this with your buddies. It's a really cool thing. You get a buddy and you tell them, I want you to ask me these questions every day. And the questions are, Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do? It's just what you want to do. Like, I want to chant all my rounds before 10 o'clock. So that's my question. So Karuna Avatar is my buddy. I said, I want you to ask me, did you chant your rounds before 10 a.m.? And I'm not going to eat breakfast till I finish 16. Did you finish 16 before you eat breakfast? Of course. Did you follow these principles? Did you go to bed by 9, whatever? And I don't want to say no, right? But what if I say no for 3 months? Like somewhere in my brain after like 3 months, I'm going to go, wait a minute. I've been telling him no for 3 months. This is what I want to do. And something clicks. So that, it's like we need help. We can't, to think you could do it alone and how's that working for you? If it's not working good, just admit it and get help. That's humility. I need help.
Yeah.
Right?
I actually just started this accountability partnership about 2 weeks ago with a dear friend, like this question program. And it works so well. It's so effective, because the thing is, even if you say no, but a very, very important thing is that it has to be someone that it has to be someone that you're like very close to, someone that you really trust, because then, you can say no to them, but still, as you say, Gurudev, like you really just don't want to say no. So it's very effective. I can attest. I've put it to the test, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So like on this point of technology just being such an overwhelming, like ever-present element of temptation in our life, that I almost want to say, like on a fundamental level, like the human conditioned psyche is just not capable of resisting that much temptation that consistently. It's just like always there, always. And you constantly have this thing where it's like, like what's happening in that series, I want to see what's happened next, or like this video game, that, and then obviously it culminates in pornography. So I came to sort of like a theoretic, I have this like theoretical proposition for what may be a solution to this problem. I don't know how universally applicable it may be. So because it's completely theoretical, at least for me, I haven't succeeded to do this yet. So I want to run this by you, Gurudev, and hear what you think. And because essentially, if we have so much temptation at our fingertips, and the temptation to space out is there, perhaps the solution is that we just need to fill our lives with as much like meaningful, inspiring responsibility as we possibly can, so that we just have no other choice. Like, you can't space out, like I had this experience when I was preparing for our program this evening. I had a few things to get done, and I was just like so absorbed, because I knew that this was going to happen. We were going to do it this evening, and this is a very, very important thing, and we're into this thing. And I just had this experience of absorption, and I was just like, wow, this is where it's at. Positive absorption, so the question would be like, is that something that we can really apply to all people? Do all people have the willpower and the capability and the initiative to be able to really fill their lives with commitments to things that they value, so that there's no time to space out?
Can I amplify that a little bit? Just a little addendum on that.
Sure.
I feel like the old world, just in congruence with exactly what Karuna Avatar is saying, recommended marriage and then children. Because that's an intense responsibility that, unless you're going to be a really bad husband and father, then if that's not your intention, then you're going to have to really step up to meet that responsibility. So I feel like one of the ways in which sexuality has been developed in this postmodern era, people aren't taking that responsibility for whatever reasons, good or bad. That's not happening as much. And therefore there's this lacuna left that was filled by that. And it wasn't just like you got married because you love someone. It was like, this was your obligation. Like, you're 20, now it's time to get married. And then after marriage, it was time to have children. So as we've eschewed that understanding of marriage and that understanding of the necessity of children, it's just left this huge lacuna in so many of our lives that is filled by this unhealthy expression of sexuality. Anyway, so that's just amplifying just what Corona was saying.
You know, sometimes I go through my day, see what's happening, and I think, Kali Yuga is worse than I thought. Even seems worse than the Bhagavatam describes. Like, what's going on here? You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because what you're describing is like, it's like, I was thinking, I don't know if you know this, but the British, one of their strategies to convert India was to close the Gurukulas, because when they came, there were, I think there were like 2,500 Gurukulas. That was like the basis of the strength of the culture. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, Gurukula. Okay, what is Gurukula? Well, from 5 to 25, it's pretty austere. It's extremely disciplined. You learn to mature, become a mature man, sense controlled, emotionally controlled. You can take care of yourself. You're independent. You're responsible. Do we see that amongst boys today? Like, you know, I was at a college, and this wasn't going on in my college. I was at a college once doing some preaching, and there was a pub in the college, and I was like, a pub? Like, you're not supposed, and the kids are drinking. It's like, wait a minute, this is a university. Like, what's going on here? You know, Gurukula, modern education. So now if you take pornography, what could be more antithetical to Gurukula than pornography and or unrestricted sexuality? So, you know, in answer to your question, the answer is yes and no. On your own, for many people, no. You've been conditioned by this social culture, which does not, it's like what you're saying. I always joke, what you're saying, Jai Jagannath, like, what are the songs we grow up hearing? You know, I saw you, that was it, you know, I'm gonna take you home, sleep with you, right? And that little, you know, 12-year-old boy is singing that song. Hey, baby, let's go to bed tonight. Like that should be illegal, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Wrote the song should be in jail. Whatever company promoted the song should be fined and closed down.
Absolutely.
So that was part of my, like, we're trying to help devotees become celibate after growing up like that. Where's the song? I went to your house with my parents and they chose me for your bride. And we spent our life together through low and high tide. And even though sometimes I didn't love you, but still I did anyway. We didn't hear that at all, right? So, you know, and now you're supposed to enter a relationship of marriage, having heard about romance, you know, love, romance, sex, you know, it's graphic. If it's not graphic, the music makes it graphic, you know. It's like, you know, because modern music, it's like sex personified, the sound, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, it's like if you translate that sound into action, what is it? Okay, we won't talk about it, but
My God.
So that's part of my no answer. On your own, you know, you have to be a very strong, determined person. Yeah, on your own, you can do it with good association. But I think for many people, what's behind what you're saying is, what if I've been trapped in that culture and I'm not a determined person? I'm procrastinating, lazy.
Right.
You need help. You need someone who can help you get out of that. Those samskars, how did you pick them up? What are your beliefs? What are your, why? You need help with that. And we traditionally thought 16 rounds, you're good to go. You'll have no problems, right? Yeah,
Right.
maybe if you chant 16 good rounds and you have really good association, but who chants 16 good rounds? You know, everyone's like, the holy name will do everything. Yeah, if you actually chant it. But the average devotee, you know, the quality of their chanting is like, okay, you need help. Prabhu, we got a therapist for you, and we got this book for you, and we got this group for you, and we got this software. You had to cover your bases, you know. So I think what you say, Kurun Avatar, it's very important, but we need, it goes back. I need to recognize it, and I need to figure out this is a problem, and I'm going to need help with it. And so, it starts with recognizing the problem, but you have to recognize not everybody can do it. Some people can. They're very sattvic. They're very determined. They put their mind to it, and they can. And Archana City, she would hear me like give my workshops, and she said, "You're like that, but don't assume everyone else is." I said, "Well, you just have to think this way, and you just have to do that and do this, and just have to get up, sit down in one place and chant your rounds. You'll have no problem." They're like, "Well, yeah, that's easy. That's easy for you to say because you do it, but that's a solution. So you hear these heavy classes, but okay, when reality sets in, most people are not on that level yet. Maybe in the future. So you can help people become like that. You can help people become more disciplined. A lot of the problem is we have beliefs growing up. That this is what love is, and life is supposed to be this way, and so forth. I had a belief that if you're responsible, you'll be miserable. I was like, I was a hippie, footloose, fancy free. Responsibility? Are you kidding? That's like depressing, So, that was a real challenge in being a devotee because Prabhupada wanted us to be responsible, and that's what it means to be a man. And then you get married and you have kids and the whole thing. So, all this stuff is in my head. Fortunately, I realized it and I worked through it. I go, no, responsibility that's the key. You have to look at it positively. And if we can help people look at the things positive in a positive way and the negative in a negative way, because usually we have it the opposite often. The negative looks really good and the positive looks really bad because the positive is hard to get to and it's austere and only the fanaticals can do it,
Right.
Not true, so all these things you get with the help of senior guidance or counselors or mentors or even therapists if it's really a difficult situation. So I counsel devotees, so I see this all the time. Like I have bird's eye view of devotees' problems, and they're mostly psychological, conditioned, either conditioning, which relates to psychology, or just some scars, conditioning, growing up in this culture, and so forth. And second generation born in the movement are not. They're not. They didn't get a free pass in this lifetime. They're dealing with it also because they grew up, in this culture. They're devotees, but they grew up in it. And this culture is this culture. It affects you, isn't it? Like
absolutely.
Generation, don't know all the music and the pop and what's going on in the world. Yeah, they're so.
I often feel like, for myself, like damaged goods. Like by the time I came to the movement, I'm just like damaged goods, and the Hare Krishna movement or the philosophy is like, okay, I think we could patch up that spot and patch up that, but the rest of the blood we got to leave. It's just there's too much damage. We can't really do anything about that.
Yeah, and okay, so the thing is that it seems to me that the brahmachari ashram in our society is like an endangered species, like really functional brahmachari ashrams. And I'm talking about actual physical spaces where men are being supported in a brotherhood of like shared accountability and goal directedness and whatever. It's just such a rare thing these days. You almost can't really find it anymore. And then not even to speak for ladies, like what kind of facility has there ever been for ladies? And then just kind of back to the guys quickly, what also happens with a lot of guys is they may have like some years in the brahmachari ashram getting some training and like reaching some sort of decent level of self-discipline and like goal directedness and whatever. But then the bachelor zone comes. And it's like this awkward, like Tatashta zone where you just don't know where you are. The dreaded bachelor pad. My God, it's impossible. So, and then what happens is that just like so many guys just like lose all of that sort of training that they got in the brahmachari ashram, not necessarily completely because those some scars go pretty deep, but you know what I mean. It's like it's a really difficult thing. So on a practical level, on a sociological level, like, you know, we all know that we haven't yet implemented Varnashram properly, and that's going to take some time. But just on a practical level, like, how do we actually approach this, Gurudev? Like really supportive, interconnected communities and brotherhoods of people that are really there for each other, really helping each other out, which is not just on the internet. Like, this virtual space is just becoming so, also, like, how long can we look at screens for? That's not sustainable. And it's like this
Right.
corona situation. So what to do, like, practically? Sorry, that was a long
You
rant.
need to read Kalakanta Prabhu's book, Endangered Species. He deals with that. He answers that question because he has an ashram where they made maybe in the last 10 years, 300 devotees came through that. I could answer on different levels. One thing is really important to understand, and I don't think many brahmachari leaders understand this. The goal of brahmachari ashram is actually to prepare you for life. But in ISKCON, it's like the goal is to prepare you for life as a brahmachari, which in 90+%, why prepare somebody for something they can't do? Right. So brahmachari ashram, the way you described it, is like, okay, you got trained, right? What happens when we went to Afghanistan? We weren't trained to fight the war because we never fought a war that way. We were trained to fight a traditional war, a traditional. And so they went there. Number one, they didn't know how to fight the war. They thought, we thought 3 days, it's over, right? No. Secondly, when we took over the country, we weren't prepared. It was like, oh, fight the war, and then we can't just leave it now. We left the country in a mess. So it's like that brahmachari. He's trained to go out in book distribution, trained to get it from Mangalarti like that. But when you actually put him out in the world, it's like, I wasn't trained for this. That's the fault of the brahmachari ashram. I think the Bhaktivedanta manner, they've actually deal with it. I think they actually train them. They say, look, we'll let you be a brahmachari for 2 years, and then we'll help you reintegrate. And so we want to train you how to reintegrate, how to think responsibly, how to be gurahasta and so forth. So that's part of the problem. And that, if we had that kind of brahmachari ashram, I think we would all be so inclined to tell young men, okay, when you get out of the university, just go in the brahmachari ashram for 2 years. You get this training, it'll be invaluable. But now we think, I'm not going to tell him to go to the brahmachari ashram. He won't know what to do when he gets out of it. He'll be in 2 cultures. And so that, I think, would make a huge difference, because I know even back in the 70s, sometimes I was reluctant to tell people to move in the temple because I didn't feel that it was the best thing, or they would be comfortable, that we didn't have a mature ashram. So, and then the other thing, right? What did you learn in the brahmachari ashram? I learned that women are less intelligent.
Haribo.
Ashram is a dark well. What else did you learn? I learned, like, getting married is a fall down. So you don't want men coming out of the ashram with those samskars, and that's, I mean, hopefully nowadays not so much, but I'm sure it's there in some places to some degree. And when you're asking what do we do, the panacea for all the what do we do's are good leadership, because you can't. The leaders have the power to do it. And so you see a problem, you become a leader in your place, in your temple, in your area. This won't happen. You can't guarantee it won't happen anywhere else. But once you make it happen in your place, then you know what happens? People start saying, what are you doing? How do you do that? Your devotees are so nice. Your men are so mature. Your men, people that graduated your ashram, they've had no divorce. All their wives say, these guys are great. Why? What are you doing? Then we want to find out. You go on, you get up there on the stage. This is what you should do, everyone. They're like, who are you? Karuna Avatar. You've been a devotee a few years. You're nobody. But once you do it, they're like, Karuna Avatar, how did you do that? The gurus are coming to you. Can you do seminar in our temple and help us? It's the only way you can do it is understand the problem and then talk about it, and then your area of influence, do it.
Yeah. Excellent.
So when you see a problem, this is my philosophy. When you see a problem, it means Krishna chose you to solve it. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it, because not everybody sees the problem. So if you see it, it means, in my book, it means you're meant to solve it. Krishna gave you the vision to solve it. And if you look at my life, it's exactly what I do. I'm working to solve problems that I see perhaps are bigger problems than people realize. And so, and the other thing is all that energy and frustration you have, like, why do we have these ashrams or why don't we have these? When you start doing it yourself, it relieves you of the frustration because you're doing something to solve the problem. Oh, I'm doing something, at least in my area, in where you're going to be in Somerset or whatever it's called. Somerset.
Yeah, well, I really hope it's America, but Biden just closed the borders to all South Africans. So anyway, we'll see how long that takes. But anyway,
this leads me to something. I guess maybe it's more of an emotional thing, but I'm going to call it as the betrayal of the father and the need for reconciliation with the father. And now this comes on many levels, but we were touched on it briefly before we started the podcast. But some of us didn't grow up with fathers. Like I'm one person. So the betrayal starts from like the very beginning. And then you join a movement where you're expecting older generation devotees to give shelter and prepare you for the next stages. And that also wasn't there. And so you deal with the betrayal of the father on that level also, whether it's your guru or the temple president or just senior devotees who are around you, but they don't take responsibility for you for whatever reasons, good or bad. And so you're suffering from this sort of demoralized feeling of the betrayal of the father, which you carry with you consciously. And I think for me, at least, it was largely subconscious, but it manifests in really awkward ways as you're moving through life. And so in order for you to get resolution for yourself and maybe for others around you, there's a need for like what I'm going to call reconciliation with the father. And I just feel like, I guess I feel a lot of frustration. I first came interested in this a few years ago when a friend came to me saying that, you know, he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar by his significant other. And that kind of spawned me to really look into this. And I started asking all my guy friends, hey, bro, you look at porn? Everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, we need to do something about this. And as I started looking into it, I saw that the Christians, like way ahead of the game. It's like they got so much stuff for their constituency. I looked at even Islamic things. They got a lot of stuff for their constituency also. And it's not that just because they've been around longer, like the problem is as fresh to them as it is to us. And when I look at ISKCON, it's just like crickets, tumbleweed, like hardly any conversation about it. If you bring it up, it's like smashed, it's concealed. And so I personally have experienced that betrayal of the father experience with this issue also, where it's just like, shh, can't talk about it. And so for that reason, I've reached out to Karuna Avatar. We're trying to do something. We're trying to create positive conversations around these things. But I still feel like a subconscious need for perhaps reconciliation internally. Because, you know, I don't think I'm a jaded devotee, but I could see myself being a jaded devotee very quickly and soon because of this experience. So I'm kind of looking for your wisdom around this sort of dilemma of the psyche.
I could tell you some thoughts I have on this, and they're very personal. And well, the first thing I want to say is, you know, I gave this course on pornography, and one of the things I was doing was going to other websites, religious sites, to see what they say about it. And amazing resources. Like wow, what, you know, they put in years and years and years, and like they got it covered from head to toe, every side. And you go to ISKCON, zero. You know, we're trying to do something now. We created a site, you know. So, and I have done a course. It's not up there yet. So, but that's minuscule compared to what they're doing. And then, like you're saying, this is kind of the sweep it under the rug, you know, like nobody wants to talk about it. And I had a few thoughts, and I can't say this is for everyone, but I think some leaders do not know how to talk about it other than chant 16 rounds and, you know, get up for Mangalartik and solve all your problems, which it used to when you lived in an ashram. It kind of was like Karuna is saying, it solved it while you're in the ashram until you went out of the ashram and you realized it was circumstantial. It didn't actually get to the heart of it. I think that's what Karuna is saying. You know, we have to be careful to solve the problem without solving it. It's just, you know, you're on a leash. Okay, you know, you can't bite anybody because you're on a leash, but when we let you off that leash, you're dangerous. So, so I think some leaders, they actually didn't know how to deal with it. They just thought, well, you're in Maya, that's the problem, and get out of Maya, and here in Chant, you'll be out of Maya, problem solved.
Right.
I think some other leaders just felt like there's no agreed upon standard, and I can't talk about it without getting my head cut off, because if I say anything other than, you have to chant 50 rounds if you want to have kids, and if you don't want to have kids, that's it. And that's all I can say. And I know realistically that doesn't work for everyone, but I can't say anything else, because if I do, I get a phone call. Mahatma Prabhu, you can't say that. And I said, well, have you ever said what I said? And they say, yeah, but not in Bhagavatam class. I say it all the time, privately. And so I'm like, okay, we can say things privately. We can't say publicly. That's a problem, because it makes people think publicly that we don't say these things privately, but we are. And so there's this kind of issue where it seems in our movement, it's a topic that's been really difficult to talk about. Like nobody really wants to come out and talk about it. And when I say you'll get the call, I got the call for talking about it. This is not theoretical. I mentioned some things and I got the call. You can't say anything but 50 rounds for children, which of course is the goal, and which is of course what Prabhupada said. And we wouldn't want to minimize that, but sometimes people can't do that, and you don't want them to kill themselves. You don't want them to give up. So that's one point. Now we come to your point about the father figure and what we need. My experience, and I don't have resentment towards my father, but my father, maybe it was my perception, it's not true, but I felt my father was absent in my life in terms of educating me about life. Like, and all I got is, women are basically good for sex. It was subtle. He never said it, but it was implied. And I never learned about, open the door for the woman and all that stuff. I learned that from my wife. I didn't learn it from him. You know what a man is? And I go, no. Well, a man, he'll give it to his wife first, and he'll open the door for it, and he'll make sure that she's satisfied, even if he doesn't want to do it. If she wants it. Like, oh, I never learned that, or I did, but I didn't. And so go down the list. Did I learn how to be sense controlled from my father? Well, maybe a little bit. He was, responsible, but we never talked about it. So I realized, like I was giving the example before we started this session, we were talking about, I feel like I was trained to fight the Afghanistan war. When I got there, I realized this is not a war that U.S. Army has ever fought. And so I come and join ISKCON, and they're like, okay, go open a temple, go on Sankirtan, go do all these things. And you have all the spiritual knowledge, but as a person, I'm kind of weak. I have fears. I tend to blame people. I tend to criticize. I have all these disempowering, dysfunctional aspects of me that, my father never worked on with me. He never said, hey, listen, you just got to be stronger with this and take responsibility. Don't blame, because if you blame, you're avoiding, and criticism means you have the problem. Recognize these things. And so I realized at a certain point in my life, rather than blaming him, I realized I just didn't have the tools to do everything I wanted. And I just decided I have to get these tools. Like, okay, I didn't have a father. It's history. I had a father my whole life as a devotee. He died, after being a devotee, for 22 years, he died. So, I had a father, but I didn't get those things. And I thought, and I feel this is a really important point, like what you didn't get, now you're going to have to, somehow you're going to get it. If that temple president doesn't give it to you, then you read a book by somebody and they give it to you, and so that's what I did. I had to go out and fill up all the empty spaces in me by, not only just learning from Prabhupada, but certain things it wasn't Prabhupada was teaching. They're just kind of like ABCs of being a human being, which Prabhupada really were. And I always say, I think Prabhupada had a little more confidence in us than he should have. That we were more human than we were. So those aspects, I just go out and learn them. Stop being a crybaby, baby. Stop complaining, this and that. And I would see it coming up when devotees couldn't work together. It was all that stuff, that they hadn't matured. They hadn't got growing up from their mother, father, family, whatever. So I think that's important to acknowledge what you're saying. And if we don't get it, don't give up on ourselves. Then, find, okay, maybe so-and-so is going to be your father. He wrote this book about responsibility. So he's going to be one of my father figures, or so, whatever. So that's the road I took. And I saw the lacking, and I saw that we were asked to fight a war that I wasn't really capable of doing. And I saw that a lot of my dealings as a leader, not a lot, but sometimes were unfair because of my immaturity. And I regret doing that. I regret not being more mature. And so I think the big message to all of us is grow up as soon as you can, because
yes.
It's going to empower you to be the best person you can be for other people, the best leader you can be, the best husband, wife, son, daughter, grandfather, Sangha, everything, And I study psychology perhaps a little too much, because I know what makes people tick, and it could cause me to make offenses to them because I know why they're doing things. But I think it's important to throw something out to the world. And I don't mean this to be offensive, but we have seen there are devotees that actually cannot cooperate with anyone. And there are devotees who have issues with leadership, and they're attacking all the time. There was even one devotee who said, who's ever a leader, I will attack. I don't care what he believes. If he believes in Ritvik, I won't. If he doesn't believe in Ritvik, I will. I'll just attack. He was honest enough to admit that's his nature. And so if you're in that category where you really have a hard time cooperating, getting along my way or the highway or this or that, you have to be right. You can't compromise. You're not empathetic. You can't listen. Or if you're extremely critical, especially of leadership, you need to go back to the drawing board and realize there are some things inside that have to be recalibrated, that just you picked up along the way in terms of leadership, authority, or maybe some scars from other lives. They're not healthy. And no, it's ISKCON is this. No, realize ISKCON may be this, but a mature person doesn't start yelling and screaming and stomping their feet like an 8-year-old, which is what a lot of people do in the name of philosophy. And I'm like, no, it's not philosophy. I also agree with you. This is something wrong, but I'm not out on the internet painting horns on GBC's heads, to get my point made. Or I don't have my show, which picks, I don't have a show which picks on a leader every week, to make up stories about how bad they are. That is a sign, hello, something's going on. And to not recognize that is the height of immaturity. So I think that's really important for us to look at, okay, maybe you didn't have a father figure. We understand you'll have problems. Maybe your mother was an alcoholic. We understand you're going to have problems. It's not your fault. But now the question is, what are you going to do about it? If your parents are alcoholics, there's a very good chance you're not well adjusted to deal with everyone in every situation. All right, get help. There's 12-step programs for that. Why not? That's what I did, I'm Jewish. That means my mother's Jewish. You have a Jewish mother, you need help. It's just the way it is, Jewish mothers. So, I'm recovering. I'm recovering from my Jewish mother. She was very nice, but still. So, we all have work to do, not just you or Karuna Avatar or me, but we all do. And I think that's super important. And I really hope that devotees can recognize, if their behavior and their relationships are not good and they're just attacking, criticizing, they have some issues that they're not confronting, dealing with. Because if they do, it's going to calm down. The issues won't go away, but the way they deal with them and how disturbed they are by them is going to change. And they'll be in a more functional way to actually solve problems. You don't solve problems by putting people down, because people feel you. They're not listening to you. They feel you. You're attacking me. Okay, get out of here. I'm not going to listen to you.
Right.
It's the way the world works. So,
We have a couple of, I think, important questions. Karuna, can you ask Christy's question first? Because it's been there for a while. It seems super important.
Absolutely. Okay, so Christy's asking, hopefully nobody throws stones at me for this. We won't, Christy, and certainly no one else will. But I feel the sexual topics in ISKCON are mainly male oriented. They need to speak about it with females as well. It feels as if all females have no problems, and that doesn't represent the reality. They are just ashamed to talk about it.
Yeah. I think I don't deny that. I think ISKCON men, unlike secular men, feel awkward talking about sexual problems with women. I know in the 12-step program, they're men and women together. But the point is well taken. It's also a problem for women, which I think men need to be sensitive to when they walk around with their dhoti above their knees and no shirt and decked out in Mayapur like they sometimes do. And, after, working out for 3 months every day and, strutting around, there's women there also, that's not like so easy for them.
Oh
We
my
don't
God.
think like, most men don't think like that, but you think, because, we think, well, it's just a male thing, the physical body. But anyway, it may be, Christy, that now at this stage of ISKCON, we need to educate the men about how they behave towards women and don't think that their behavior doesn't disturb them. But women also need their support groups, I think, at this point. Bringing them together, I don't know if men want to do it. I know a lot of men who don't want to do it, but maybe that's also a problem. I don't know. Maybe they need to do it.
I have a lot of suspicion around that personally when we've started our group, and I have women reached out to me in the past saying, well, can we join? And my general experience is that I can speak for myself also, but I've had this reported to me by many members of the group. If there's even one woman there, they will not say anything. I've experienced that. Like, even if there's one lady, I saw it. We had the mantra retreat, the very first one, I went to it. And at the very first one, there were a lot of ladies there. They had like a woman's panel and so on. And it was okay, but there was a space that was meant for the guy groups. And there was one Mata who was coming, one lady who was coming that time for all the meetings. And I saw like no one was talking about anything. It was like very superficial. And I deduced that it was due to her presence. And then as soon as there was a time, because we complained about it, some of us did, I certainly did, and there were others who complained about it. When she left, then all of a sudden it was a very different conversation that was able to happen. But anyway, just I want to throw it out there. The general guys are like that. Maybe it's an ego thing. I suspect it's an ego thing. But if there's even one lady in the room, guys won't open up. It's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, and it in general changes the energy as well of the room.
Right.
Not the fault of the woman. So, I think 2 points we can take from this. It's probably better women have these discussions, and maybe what Christy is saying, maybe on some level the discussion can be with men and women, but it would be different. And I think that's a good point, that it has to be opened up, and men need to know how women feel and women perceive it and the struggles they go through, and also how we can treat one another respectfully without being too intimate or too informal. And we have this problem, especially in the West. Like, where do you draw the line between being too formal and too informal? Because you preach to this woman, she becomes a devotee, she moves in a temple, and the day she moves in the temple is the last time you ever talk to her.
Oh my God!
For the last year, you were bringing her, right? Well, I'm a Brahmachari, I can't talk to them. Well, how could you talk to me before you? Well, now you're Brahmachari and we can't. So,
oh my God, that's real.
Yeah. So that's, you imagine as a woman how you feel, because the women, like, they don't feel that sexual thing like the men feel. And so I think I really like this point, because I've spoken to women. I did a sadhvi sangha to tell them how men operate, like when you strut by, Hare Krishna, like that. What are they actually thinking? Which all the women fainted when I gave that. They just couldn't believe that men would think like that. But it's good for women to know what men think when you're just minding your own business, still what they think if you get too close. And it's good for the men to know what the women think when you guys get too close, or when you treat us this way, or when you ignore us. So
Mm.
I think that's healthy. And here in Gainesville, they have a very healthy ashram. It's very family oriented, but there's thresholds of how far you can go. But
Mm.
if you ever associate with the men and women in Gainesville, you're blown away on how healthy the environment is, because
Mm.
men and women are together, but there's no vibe there because they really mastered that, you know, and I appreciate it. And I think it's you can see the women, they have no complaints there. They don't feel denigrated at all. They feel as valued as anybody. So that's important. Again, leadership. But I think it's a great
Mm.
discussion. Maybe we can someday have a discussion with men and women on the panel
That would be great. Absolutely.
about these
Mm.
issues. Bring it out, you know, in the open, in a, you know, in a way which is just real and important. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you indeed. Abir has something also, or Premananda Vilas. He's got this question.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go back to Karuna's question about how to navigate the transition between brahmachari and grihasta?
Yeah.
I don't know what more.
I
Yes.
could explain maybe in detail. I think a couple of things you want to look at is what samskaras did you pick up in the brahmachari ashram that will make you a perfect candidate for divorce in the grihastha ashram. Unless you deposit those, when you leave the ashram, you leave those samskaras in the brahmachari room. If you bring them with you, it's like, okay, you know, this marriage is not going to work. So if you picked up any unhealthy samskaras for marriage, you need to drop them. The second thing, which I tell anybody, whether they're coming out of the brahmachari ashram or anything, you really need to learn about marriage, because no matter what you think you know, it's probably about 3% of what you need to know to have a healthy marriage. And you will find men who've been married 25 years. My wife does a marriage workshop. You will find men married for 25 years, and she will teach them things that are so helpful and so that they didn't know. And it's just, you know, I can't say why. I'm also guilty of it. So the more you can learn about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a father, what women need. And I find with men, it's probably also with women, but I find with men, they always come up to me and say, my wife doesn't like this, but I do. And I tell her I want to do it this way. Do I have to listen to her? This is the question is always, do I have to listen to her? A non-devotee won't ask that question. Only a student of Srimad Bhagavatam would ask that question, because of course we know the wife should just do whatever I say, right?
Oh my God.
So, you know, you have to deprogram yourself a little bit and come down to reality that you're not marrying a woman from a village or a queen from a bygone age. You're marrying generally a Western woman. And if you marry a young Indian, she's also Western. So I think some devotees have a hard time with that, you know. No, but you know, but Devahuti, she's like this. Yeah. Yeah. And you're like Kardama, give me a break, you know. You become Kardama, then you can demand her to be Devahuti. So you have to become realistic. That ashram, it's totally different than the brahmachari ashram. And it's not what you think it is, because if you think it's like it is in Bhagavatam, it's not, you know. And
It's not.
you know, you have to really understand Grihastha life is not in a Bhagavatam blueprint ideal. That's what you're shooting for. It may be impossible. You do as best you can, but it has to work. You know, I got the blueprint. We're doing the Bhagavatam ideal. Only problem is we got divorced. Great. Congratulations, Prabhu. You know, the operation is a success. The patient died. That's not what we're looking for, you know. I might have to change up the protocol in the middle of the operation. You know, it's not what my teacher taught me, but if I do what he taught me, I'm going to kill this patient. So I think that's super important. And you know what I think is really good if you want to get married? I found this by accident. Hang out with couples that have good relationships, because a lot of times you'll watch them and you go,
Yeah.
God, I never thought that's how you do it. You know, here's this guy, he's so respected and he's got everybody kissing his feet, and his wife, you know, wants to do this, and he doesn't want to, but he knows she wants it. He says, okay, we'll do it. I'm like, I don't believe it. Where's that in the Bhagavatam? No, this is real life, human life. So it's important. That's really good training for you to be around grihastas who have a very healthy relationship. And you see the husband apologizing to his wife for saying the wrong thing or doing something wrong. And, that's healthy, right? He's washing the dishes. Wow. Things of that nature. He's taking out the trash. He's the temple president, but he's taking the trash out. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. So those are some things you can do.
Okay, Bear. I hope that satisfies to some degree. A lot of people are really appreciating your contribution on your website for their own transitions.
Thank you. I just want everyone to know, if you think I have wisdom, it's because I made mistakes, and that's how I figured out what to do. So I wasn't born this way, believe me. And like for every gem of wisdom I have, there's a mistake behind it, believe me. So I just want you to know that I wish there was someone like me who made all the mistakes, that was letting me know the mistakes I was going to make when I was 25. And I offer this with the mood that you don't have to make the mistakes. I made them for you. So I'm this guinea pig, and I'm just teaching what I know. I don't think I'm so wise. I just have experience. When you do the wrong thing, you become smart. So I can help you avoid a lot of the mistakes I made. And that it's just true. I'm not trying to be humble. It's just a fact. You should have seen me. I was also a fanatical brahmachari. I mean, I tend to be more of a balanced person. So when I say fanatical, it has limitations. But I have said some fanatical things and done some fanatical things in my day, which is why I tell you don't do them, because I did them. So I want you to know that. And that's why I'm very patient with people when they do wrong things, because I'm just seeing myself. I go, I did that, I can't beat you up for that. I've done it a million times. Yeah.
Well, hearing you, just to my previous point, I'm feeling a sort of surrogate father figure in your vibration for myself, and I think for a lot of people who are hearing this, it's like talking to an elder, a surrogate father who's giving us this wisdom. And I think this has been one of the biggest engagements we've had for our live podcast. So people were very eager to hear this wisdom. And I can tell you, honestly, I'm personally touched by this conversation. I'm not a very emotional guy, at least not in public, but I do feel a little moved by this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wasn't expecting that. So it's I'm
a little
taken off guard. I'm always criticizing Karuna for being too sentimental. So I'm a little taken off guard that I feel my own heart very much moved by this.
I think these issues are, these issues are so important to everybody. And I've made it kind of my focus to focus on the issues that are most important, because if they're not being addressed, I think it's a travesty in our movement. And so if you look at the work I'm doing, I tend to hone in on, I find this space. I go, well, no one's talking about that. But like, I have a workshop on vows. It's going to come out. We've done the videos. It's going to come out soon. And I'm like, ISKCON's 51 years old. Or 55. Everyone has to take vows. It makes no sense that there's not a course on it. You're asking people to take initiation, So I just see this space and I like, okay, I know this is relevant. Resentment. We did the courses. It's so pervasive. Bad japa. How many years are we going to go with bad japa? No course. I learned, I want to share something I learned. I'm glad you brought up this point. I spent $2,900 once. You might think I'm crazy, but I decided that I want to dedicate my life to this kind of work, and especially doing workshops, which will go for days, and you have to keep people engaged. And so you can't just give a lecture for 23 hours, So we learned, this interactive techniques.
Right.
And after 4.5 days, one of the biggest takeaways that this teacher said, is one of the best teachers in North America. He said, speak to the conditioning. isolate what is the exact problem. And when you speak to that, everyone's going to have the emotional experience. They go, oh, you're speaking to me. This is so real for me. This is what I'm dealing with.
Mm,
And
mm,
that was like such a breakthrough and sometimes I'd hear classes and, they're really good classes. And I'd think, but this doesn't relate to anything. Nobody in this room, that's not what they're dealing with. The people in this room, they can't get up before 8 a.m. They're following 2.5 principles. And you're off in Vrindavan, Krishna Lila. Wait a minute, not that we shouldn't, but that was I kind of knew where people were at. They were telling me so I think that's important for all of us to do, and all the speakers and all of you who do the shows, and like Namras does shows. And I know he likes to get into the juggler vein of, that's where ISKCON needs to go. Because, sweeping it under the rug, and everyone in their bedroom is dealing with this problem, but you go online and no one's talking about it. It's, then you got to go on a Christian site to hear someone talk about it. Like, no, that's, so that's just a little history of, I think, why you're being moved, not necessarily, what I'm saying, as much as this topic is, it's so resonating for everyone.
Yes, thank you. So, Karuna Avatar, I don't know if you have anything final. I would hope in the future we can have you on again for something else, juicy, because it's important for us younger guys and gals also to go to our elders. I definitely, I grew up with fantasy genre of movies, which I love, and there's always like the elders that you have to go to for the special wisdom to deal with the special problems. And so hearing your vibration today is putting me in this sort of mythical experience of going into an elder and getting special knowledge. And so super duper grateful, very humbled by your presence. I don't know if you want to say anything final before we go off, Karuna Avatar.
I'm just like bubbling over with gratitude and joy right now. And Gurudev, yes, we would absolutely love to have you back for version 2.0 of this talk, because we actually still have so many questions, so much that we would like to discuss. So we would certainly like to do it again.
I want to start a university.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Be a Man University. So this will be part of the curriculum here. This is part of the curriculum. Be a Man University, because we have now in many places more women coming than men, and they're looking for husbands, and we need certified husbands, like certified used cars. We need certified husbands that aren't going to crash, and if they're not certified, they could break down. So that was one of my dreams, is to create in some kind of educational system we actually get certified, that we trust that now what it means to be a good husband, and that if we did that, it would be such a blessing for the women and a blessing for the men and blessing for the children. And so I think that's so important. That's on my to-do list of the future, whatever we call it, Be a Man University or something. For the whole workshop on, all the things, that we're missing in our life as men, that we need to be able to show up as real men for our wives, for our kids, for the devotees. And you're also going to be elders someday, you're going to grow up, and there's going to be a lot of young people looking to you, and they're going to be looking at how you act more than what you say. They're going to look at your example. You were stable. Your kids are great. Your wife is happy. You were, you contributed wisdom. So I think that's important. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you all so much. If you haven't already, I would suggest you all give a follow to Bodhika platform. It's an online community where you can get contact with devotional creators and how bhakti is actually impacting their life. Arise is just one of the many wonderful offerings on this platform. So if you're not already following, definitely give that a follow. Definitely give us a follow. Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. We're a proper podcast, so we're there on Apple and Spotify. You can give us a follow on there. And continue to watch the show, give suggestions. We have all sorts of topics lined up, some of them based on suggestions that we've received from all of you. And thank you again so much, Mahatma. This has been very solid, soothing for the soul to hear. Even your words. I mean, your words are great, but your vibration, the vibration itself is like, it's very soothing. And really grateful that you've agreed to be here with us this day.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you again.
Hadi, hadi.
And I put my website up. Anyone who's interested, my website, and it has connections to all the work we're doing. So
absolutely,
we're happy to serve you. All right, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
Gauranga, Nityananda.